You've asked him to come out.
Yeah, I've asked him to come into the meeting. That he's in alignment to come into the Would you like to stay here?
How long will he be?
I hope he's only going to be a few minutes, but I've had to ask him to leave what he's currently doing to come here. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, touch base.
We're here now. Do you have any other plans for the moment? Not for the next 5 minutes?
No, next 5 minutes for a second.
Oh, no. Can I get you a glass of water or anything?
Is it produced water or not?
No, we don't have produced water here.
Are you going to take you're going to have little barrels of produced water for the staff once you get enough out of it?
Probably not.
Why is that?
Well, Sydney drinking water conditions adhere to the Australian drinking water standards. So,
Yes, but what you're going to water our floodplains with doesn't. This is exactly our point.
So,
I want to see the general manager with a produced water keg on his desk.
You're not going to drink produced water.
You're going to water our floodplains with it. Well, watering our floodplains with it.
If you need any information, get your mind.
And I'm assuming that water goes back into the river.
Yes,
So,
And then we will eat the cattle. And then the cattle will fall into the river that way. So it's still good to us as well.
and it's cumulative. I mean, are you going to buy a piece of property out there? I think there's a lot for sale now.
Really?
Yes. You can buy the Bessier's farm. They've got a gas well 600 metres.
Can I invite you guys to come and visit our operations in Camden?
I've seen your operations at Gloucester. I mean,
So the operations in Camden are slightly different. Hi, John. Can I introduce you to Jenny? I'm sorry, I don't.
my name's John.
G'day, John. Good to meet you. Good to meet you.
Sorry, do you have a name?
I'm Brad.
Brad?
Yeah, thanks for coming down.
Daryl. Excellent. So we've got a room there if you need a. Do you want to step inside or do you want to do it? Yeah.
he's fine. He's fine.
No, I was just thinking if we needed a whiteboard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends what John has to say. The studies that we've done, I suppose that's what some reassurance on the environmental and social effects of the wells that have been drilled up there.
Would you like to sit down?
I'm fine.
Jenny's got this.
Have you seen the studies that were released? There's
I-
quite a number on the website.
Yeah, I've just started looking yesterday. Jenny's actually done a bit more research on it.
Okay, so
Also looked at the impacts of this sort of thing or whatever.
yeah, you can't take the guide through the other stuff and other geologies. It's all about the geology. It's all about the
And
geology.
then, of course, the valley, as you'd be aware, is an extremely dynamic geology in comparison to other places. I mean,
It's heavily folded and fractured, but it's not an active fault zone / seismic area as such. And
But they're still using steel pipes and cement line.
the permeabilities of the rock are very low, and that's the permeabilities of the rock. It's all about rock permeability and calcium permeability. So it's the ability of gas and water to flow through the rock, which is the key component.
what about the produced water that you're spraying on our floodplains? What about the water that you're taking out of the river to water down the produced water? You know, what about the trace elements that accumulate? You can't deny these things. You've got enormous amounts of salt. You've got biodynamic farmers. You've got children swimming in rivers. I mean,
Well, where do you want to start on those? But there's a whole raft of questions and answers there. I'm more than happy to step through each of those individually if you like.
So the produced water, once it's been used in the well, and it comes out, it's going to be used for irrigating the farmlands in the area. Is that correct?
already is being.
The water that comes out of a gas well when it's first commissioned is first of all what we call flowback water. It's the water that's used to develop the well, improve the permeability of the well.
And that has a number of chemicals and...
Well, it's low salinity water, first of all. It's water that's usually taken from a potable supply, articulated supply, or farm storage or something like that. It's usually low salinity. There are small amounts of biocides added, but predominantly it's all sand and water. We don't add any special chemicals or hydrocarbons
The
or...
biocides aren't a chemical.
They certainly are. ANC biocides.
Well,
I've got the data for it.
yeah.
You know, I know what it does.
It's the same biocides that water well drillers use to disinfect bores when they're developing bores for domestic and agricultural supplies.
Using vast amounts more when
Well-
you're drilling 330 bloody holes in a small valley.
Well, I'm just explaining what goes into the hole and what comes out. So that goes in, and the water when it comes out is all captured, tested, and at the moment it's sent for disposal. Going forward with the major development
So it's sent for disposal?
Where?
for the licence facility. We have a number of licence facilities in Sydney and Newcastle.
You're not taking, no, you're taking it to Taree, aren't you? From
No.
Gloucester, we've seen the trucks go there. We've watched them go to the wastewater
Yeah,
treatment works.
well, it's not fractal work. We haven't done the fracture simulation in Gloucester for, what, 4 years? 2009. So it's not... the produced water that's coming out of some very small flow testing programs at the moment is all being stored on site. None of it is being transported off-site. I'm talking about flowback water. I'm talking about flowback water.
Flowback water which still contains solids from the coal seam.
No, the flowback water that comes back is really just the fracture simulated water that we put into the hole to start with. So if we put 200,000 litres of water into the hole, we pull that 200,000 litres back out, and it goes currently off-site for disposal at a licence facility. Only after that do we get into the formation water that comes back out of the coal seams. And that formation water is just natural groundwater.
It's natural groundwater that's meant to be 3 kilometres underground. It's not meant to be on the surface. It's got trace elements from the coal seam, and they're radioactive, and they're heavy metals, and they're all of those things. And once you pull them out, you can't put them back there. So
Well,
you're
can I
releasing
suggest-
things that are meant to be sequestered away.
Can I suggest that you read our conceptual model report and our water balance report, which are now up on our websites? Because the Gloucester Basin is what we call a closed basin. It has no outlet. So all the groundwater that flows in terms of recharge around the edges comes out in the bottom of the valley as base flow to the streams. So the water out of those rocks and those coal seams are naturally coming back as into the catchment already.
So you're saying that the coal seam, prior to being fractured, would have had water flowing through it, and that would
Yes.
naturally flow through to the, say, the Avon?
From a kilometre underground.
Yes.
I don't believe
How would that water get up to the river? The river's flowing on the surface.
Well, it's under pressure.
So it's under pressure and it gets forced up. But prior to the hydraulic fracturing, that coal seam would not be cracked and it would have had water flowing through it, would it?
Yeah.
Or it does?
So
why does it need to be fractured if it's already fractured?
Groundwater 101 is everywhere below the regional water table. Doesn't matter whether you're in the Gloucester Basin, here in Sydney, or in Antarctica. Everywhere beneath the water table is saturated to the centre of the earth.
So we can quote...
It's not saturated to the centre of the
We
earth.
can quote you as saying that if you didn't bring the produced water up, or whatever, the fracking water, whatever you want to call it, if you didn't remove that water from the coal seam and irrigate our land with it, if you didn't do that, it would find its way into the river anyway from... How deep are these wells going to be?
To 1,000 metres.
So 2 kilometres
No,
underground...
to 1,000 metres.
To 1,000
1,000 metres, that would be the very
to
deepest.
1,000 metres, so a kilometre underground, you're telling me that trace elements from the coal seam that would be left unfracked would still find their way into a ground level river.
Yes.
Okay, well, we've got a quote there.
Yeah, it's
Quote
amazing.
John Ross.
It's
Isn't that amazing? We'll see if we can get some other experts to
Well,
agree
as
with
I
you on
say,
that.
read the conceptual model report.
Is that on your
And
website?
It's there,
Yeah,
and it's been peer reviewed. It's been peer reviewed. And
Okay.
But earlier you said that your fracking processes wouldn't interfere with other aquifers because of the geology was so stable. But now you're saying it does leach through.
no, I'm saying the natural geologies.
You're
are
saying
allow
naturally
the
it
water-
leaches through, but under
Very,
fracking
very
processes
slow.
it
We're
can't
talking,
happen.
we're talking tens of thousands of years.
Yes. Millions, whatever.
Well, maybe not millions.
So you're saying that once you
That's
fracture it, it becomes a more rapid movement of water from the fractured coal
I'm not
seams
saying-
through to the
not saying
water
that at
tank?
all, because the fracture stimulations only extend a matter of tens of metres away from the well. Once you get beyond about 50 metres in any direction, the coals are exactly the same permeabilities as non-fractured coal seams.
Right. So when you're horizontally fracturing the coal, the pipe is only a matter of say 10 or 20 metres long horizontally. Is that right?
There's no pipe that goes in.
Sorry, not a pipe. When you've drilled through,
We don't do horizontal.
it's not horizontally drilled.
The well is drilled vertically.
Yeah.
It's just like a
We're
post
not
hole.
horizontally drilling into this stuff.
Okay.
No, it's like a post hole.
Yeah.
So it's drilled to say 1,000 metres. It's cased all the way to the bottom and pressure cemented back. And right at the surface, there are additional casings and cementing. So right at the surface, against the shallow water and the soil profile, against the shallow aquifers down to 75, 100 metres, there is at least 2 levels of steel and 2 cementing. So you've got 4 levels of protection there. But down at depth, we have steel and we've got cement on the outside, and we identify the coal seams that we want to perforate, and they are perforated within that post hole. And fracture stimulation is only against that coal seam and only extends out to about 30, 40 metres on either direction.
This,
no actual invasion.
I
drilling
understand what you're
lines that
saying.
way.
Yeah.
The perforations achieved with a depleted uranium charge, is that the case?
Sand water. The charge is just a simple detonator charge to blow a very small hole, probably no bigger than that, in the steel casing and the cement.
How much salt are you going to get out of each well per year?
It depends on the salinity of the groundwater, and it's quite variable from well to well. The amount of salt that would the I'd have to go and check the numbers here, but I did some quick calculations a couple of months ago, and there's more salt in the incoming rainfall over a 10 square kilometre area than what we'd be pulling out in our gas wells in that same area.
Is that another good quote, Pam? So say that again. There's more salt coming down
In rainfall.
in rainfall in a 10 square kilometre area than you will be pulling out of the gas wells in that same 10 kilometre area.
I'd have to go back and check those calcs, but it's that's a reasonable comparison, right? The tonnage of salt is quite small in comparison to what falls on the catchment in the same area.
I'd love to have those figures. Can you go and
Well,
have those figures?
I'd have to go and research them again. We did something. Do you know whether that went up as part of that Q&A?
Is that on your website as well?
We'd have to check our question
But we can get the information through.
Q&As. We've done a whole lot around salinity most recently.
At the very least, you're doubling the amount of salt that would be on the surface then. So that actually will
No,
change.
no, not necessarily.
If it's the same or roundabout, not much less than the salt that's in the rainwater. So you've got A and plus A, give or take, right, equals 2A. So are we assuming that when we've got 2A instead of A, that the environment's going to tolerate that?
No, you've got to realise that
that's a big difference.
You've got to realise that the water that we're pulling out of the coal seams is water that would have naturally reported to the river anyway. So it's
I
not.
find that very difficult to come at, but anyway, we'll look further into that. We'll speak to other people like Pell and see if he agrees with that.
Well, as I say, all the information's on the website, and I would encourage you to read those recent reports.
I also see what's happening to people on the ground in Queensland and lots of other places and it's not just a figment of their imagination. So it's not just the salt, it's not just the water, it's not just depleting the river system to get your water, to water down your poisoned water. It's not just that, it's gas emissions, it's psychological, it's people having a gas well 600 metres from their back door. I mean, why does AGL think that it's okay to do that to a group of people because they got an approval through a week before a new law came in saying that it has to be 2 kilometres away from any town or any residential area? But AGL is quite happy, because they've got no scruples clearly, AGL is quite happy to go along and run with that. Aren't they?
Well, our approval was
they
February
are.
2011. It was way before the current buffer zones that are being talked about by government at the moment.
Okay,
So the approval is almost 3 years old.
Let me put it this way then. Let me put it this way. If AGL had scruples, if it was a respectful company, don't you think, since the ruling has now been made, that there should be a minimum of a 2 kilometre buffer zone, which I personally think is far too little? Don't you think that the right thing to do by Australian citizens would be to adhere to that anyway, as a sign of goodwill and respect for those citizens?
Well, the 2 kilometre buffer has no basis in science, and I would strongly...
There's another good quote, guys. It has no basis in science. Okay, why are they doing that then?
You'd have to ask government.
What-
We're not in control of that agenda. All the chief scientists in New South Wales
You'd
is...
be more than happy to have one in your backyard.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, tell you what, Bessia's want to sell up. Would you like to purchase their place?
I'm quite happy where I am, but I've got no problem if someone comes in and wants to do CSG development in my area. A classic example is our Camden development, where we've got over 130 wells, I think, in the ground down there, and more than 100 that are operational at the moment. It's been going for about a decade or more. Down there has been no issues or problems. There are wells that are very close to residential areas,
I haven't heard that there are no problems. I know rather a lot of people that aren't happy at all about it.
Well, can I encourage you to sign up for an open day to go and see the Camden facility and you talk about production wells close to houses and settings and how it might be affecting people or not affecting people. Camden is a classic example where we can coexist and it exists quite happily. It's been operating for 10 or more years and there haven't been any environmental or health issues in around that particular area.
Would you agree with that, Darryl?
No, I thought there was an explosion in that area, wasn't there? Or leaking methane in the rivers.
Well, I know nothing about the explosion.
You can send through the questions. We are more than happy to show you operations in Camden so you can see what it looks like from what we've got in Gloucester to situations. What the development can look like. I don't think that but we would like to work to answering those questions and providing the information. You've made it very clear that you want some specific information.
But I would also like AGL to consider that it is going to, the collateral damage for this company is going to be massive because the groundswell is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And why are you not putting your pennies into something clean? I just cannot understand.
As we're Australia's largest investor in renewable energy.
Yeah, and I wish you just use those pennies and keep going in that direction. You know, it's so short-sighted of a company like this. And it's, you know, if you really listen to the experts on post-peak oil and all of the fossil fuels experts, whistleblowers from the industry will tell you that this is not a positive energy production. The amount of infrastructure you're using, I mean, you're going to bulldoze, you know, a pipeline all the way from Leeds and Gloucester through to Hexham. What a ridiculous idea. I mean, where is the respect? the Australian people. As I said, if there was a referendum and people were asked the question, do you want this or not? You know, we know figures are well in excess of 50%, and it would go through. But AGL is happy.
I can take the feedback back. We clearly have a difference in opinion on this. And we're not expecting everybody is going to approve the process that we're taking, but what we can do,
89% don't agree with it. Yes.
what we can do is make sure that we've got the information that you're requesting.
Yes. Oh, okay. And you go on knowing that AGL is an amoral company. Basically what it is. That's your opinion. The numbers speak for themselves. Whichever way you look at it, that is public opinion about CSG. And we're not all stupid. Anyone else want to have some input?
Just one thing. Clearly,
There is a lot of information on the website. It is changing weekly. So I would encourage you to go back and have a good look
There's
at
a lot of us
the
spending a lot of
information.
time looking at your information. Trust me. And
That's
all your
fine.
data sheets, I have them all. I've looked through them to say there's hardly anything else other than sand and water, but, you know.
Are we still
I've got the
adhering to
list.
the Alberta directive? Or
Sorry, what's that?
have you heard of the Canadian Alberta directive?
No.
It allows 40 kilograms per 100 acres of some pretty scary toxic substances, heavy metals.
No,
No,
sorry.
we don't use overseas recipes or fracks. You know, it's all about the geology of the particular basin and what you need to do to maximise the frack in the near vicinity of the well. And you just have got to use whatever applies to that geology in that permeability zone. And
So you
here in
your-
Australia, sand and water doesn't.
so you're tailoring your liquids, your fracking liquids, to the geology. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so you're open, transparent and open about that on your website.
Absolutely.
The stuff you're injecting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I think we know whether our Walk Ivory RF is up and on.
Walk Ivory RAF, the application
exhibition.
is up, it's on exhibition. There's links from our site to the Department of Planning stuff, and that's currently.
Well, that particular REF is all about.
Sorry,
it's a week old.
REF.
Review
A review of environmental factors.
It's a planning
It
instrument.
goes through the process that we do proposing to do another flow testing in the Walk Ivory area in 2014, and it's been done in accordance with the new state guidelines and the new codes of practice and all the additional information and full disclosure that we have to do on frac fluids and water and impacts. And in the back of that you will see full disclosure on the frac fluids and the compounds and the recipes that we're wanting to use for that particular work program. It's all there for absolutely everyone to have a look and see.
And almost absolutely everyone's not happy about it, but you're
Well,
still going to do it.
It's sand and water. It's sand and water. So, you know, it's up there for assessment by the agencies at the moment.
And you know it's not just about what you put in, it's about what you take out. You cannot deny that those things are there. You're saying, oh, they go into the river anyway, a kilometre underground. Well, you know, we'll be looking into that.
So you're going to look into that some stuff further. You're going to send me
Unless you're comprehensive.
yeah, and we'll come back to you with some more information.
Sure, there's nothing else we can help
No.
you with today. More than happy to spend some more time if you've got
Undertaking
some.
that your stock operations would be good. You could help me with that.
That'd be awesome.
Unfortunately, John is definitely not
Definitely not in a position to
operational
make any
decisions.
comments on that.
He's not going to do that.
So you're happy for us to look into that and maybe we can come back and meet again?
Oh, absolutely. You know, send Naomi in any questions you've got, make an appointment, come in, and we're more than happy to talk. Once you've had a look at some of the more information, as I say, the Walk Ivory REF is less than a week old, and it's literally gone up in the last few days.
Yes, that's why we're here.
That's
why
so
we're
you've got it. Right, okay. Have you had a look at it?
Yes. I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with any of what's going on. I'm not happy with the fact that you see fit to do something that the people do not want right on their own land, etc., etc. Out there backwards. It's not good enough.
Alright, so we've got a plan forward.
Looks like. Anything you want